added, and then later on, about 100 years later, they sort of started to face the building in stone to upgrade it to make it a bit posher. And the last phase, was the last owners of the place, in the Victorian period, that was actually kind of, the building went in, there was a bit of a gap there, they filled that in, this is all fake half timbering, and they added some loose, they haven't got any toilets before then. I don't know what they went to, you know, 400 years without a loo, that's not good. Anywho, so that's the building. Now, there was at the back, in the Victorian time, they added extra rooms on top. So they're actually the most modern bit of the building, but they're actually the most troubled part of the building. One of the reasons for that may well be that we can't see it now. We may just be able to see it. There is a stone lintel in front of the old building that is just lying on the ground here. The lintel is the big stone that goes over the doorway, and that's from Timberbottom Farm. And Timberbottom Farm is known locally as a place where two skulls were found in the ground. Thank you. So there, that lintel there, it's got a date stone on it, 17th century, and Timberbottom Farm was where some skulls were found, and not the rest of the body, just the fragments of the skulls. And they were then when the farmer took them into his farmhouse, it wasn't just the skulls that moved in, something else moved in as well. And we'll hear more of this story later on, because the upshot of it was the skulls were taken to Bradshaw Hall, and they spent some considerable time in Bradshaw Hall, which was demolished in the 1950s, early 50s, isn't it, Bradshaw Hall? And a lot of the fabric and furniture came from Bradshaw Hall to here, and possibly more than just the fabric and the furniture. And we'll find out more about that as we explore around the building upstairs. So, would you like to go in and have a look around? Come on, let's go in and have a look around.
I don't know. Should I be? Should
No, we've moved down to from
But you still got the house in
no, not now. That was where I was born.
Now, we're actually finishing here. So I'm not going to tell you the incidents in here. There's various staff over the years that worked here, and one of them was a woman called Fiona, who was the manager. And I like Fiona. She struck me as being extremely level-headed. So no one was more surprised than I when Fiona gave me to understand that she had seen things here. And then John Gardner was someone else who said, like, I never used to believe in ghosts until I worked here. So what we'll do is we'll actually finish the tour in here, and I'll finish it off with Fiona's two stories that actually got me going. I know you've been investigating it separately, haven't you, Peter? And I've been doing some work with a group of children, and that's where I got interested in it. And you will be getting homework. Oh yeah.
Homework. And while we're here, just for those who don't know, this is Peter's book. Very good.
Yeah.
So you will be sent on your way with something else to have a look at, because I maintain that Chapeltown, Turton and Edgeworth, has Lancashire's only possessed bus stop, of which more later.
Are you going to?
That's in the book.
Well, yes, indeed, I didn't know any of the stories in the book because I'd heard stories from other people about the bus stop. In fact, we had somebody on the tour who added to that, which was a really interesting point, which you'd not come across, had you? One of the guests on the previous tour. So if you've heard any stories, please do tell us. Yeah, come on, let's go through here.
She was that lady, because I said to her, have you had any experiences? And she just went pale. You remember?
So this part of the building is Tudor. That's Tudor, and this floorway here is Stuart. So we're going back 400 or 500 years here, and we come through into Tudor room.
This is one
It's nice and it's gone, isn't it? I'm dying it's gone. That's it. This one's got.
Come along in.
Yeah.
Now, so this is actually a Tudor crook frame bedroom, and we've got Lou in the corner.
Oh.
So behind you, the suit of armour is from Bradshaw Hall. Lots of the fittings came from Bradshaw Hall. And so what we do here is, well, we've got problems with the various members of staff. So you understand that when we open up in the morning, we go from room to room, you just unlock and undo the curtains and this, that and the other. But at the same time, another subtext to this is we also have lots of reenactors coming. We get people who dress in costume and move around the buildings, and mainly working with kids. Okay? So we're quite used to seeing people in Tudor costumes sweeping around the building.
God.
Right. So on this particular occasion, Miriam Disley, Miriam, it is Miriam, isn't it? It's not Marion, it's Miriam, isn't it? So Miriam Disley opened the door first thing in the morning and unlocked, switched on the lights and walked into the room, obviously to open the curtains, when she saw a figure stood here by the window. And she noted that it was a he, long white hair, wearing a ruff and an exquisitely detailed gold doublet and hose green doublet and hose with gold thread. She said it was exquisite. And this figure just stood looking out of the window. She said actually she wasn't afraid because shortly beforehand she'd seen something else in one of the other rooms and it hadn't frightened her. So she said she's just stood watching this figure for how long she doesn't know. It was probably only seconds, willing the figure to turn around and face her. But instead, she said, as she looked at the figure, it just broke up and disappeared, leaving Miriam stood somewhat baffled by the door, thinking, what have I just seen? And this is something that Fiona says, like Fiona was very sceptical, wasn't she? Because she was saying, what have I just seen? And that's a comment that a few people have made. But this figure here by this window, which is, some of this stonework is from, possibly recycled from a local church? Middleton Hall? Right, it's been recycled stonework, it's not original, it's stuff, the stoneworks and things have come into the building. And being added to the building. Now you were saying that something else happened to yourself here.
Yeah, I was on a paranormal group in April this year, and there was a young lady who said she was a medium, and so she had connected with a spirit up in the top room, which we'll go to later, and the spirit was called Dave, and she had lost her husband some time before. She wasn't sure whether it was her husband who was contacting her or someone else, but he was called Dave. So then later on, she ended up having a dance with this spirit. And it's a big room up there, like a ballroom. But she was dancing around, and they were having a ball, you might say. So eventually, people were wandering around, and I discovered her in this room. And she had one of those little devices which sort of like scan the radio frequencies, and then you ask the spirit, is there anyone there? And you get these little lights, and they go from dull to bright red, and then a singular word, or maybe 3 words, will come onto the screen. So of course she reconnected with this spirit called Dave, and then this light was off, and there was just light coming in from that doorway, so it's fairly dark, but you could see what was happening. And so the instruction was, look under table. Just 3 words. Well, there's only one table, which is that. And so I had this same actual torch, folks. And of course, being being an old geezer that I am, I wasn't going to get down there, so she climbed down there with a view to looking under the table, because I'm shining the torch for her to see. But while I'm looking downwards, I noticed a small stone on the floor. And you can see that this floor is polished, smooth. Why would there be a stone here? So she picked up the stone, and then the next message came through on this device saying, ascend, which she understood to go back upstairs into the big room, and that's where she went. But just at that point where this word came through, I went ice cold, and my whole body was full of goose pimples, and I don't have that very often. I've only ever remember having that happen once before, and that was another occasion. But that's quite scary.
Well, this is, those are the stories we've got from this room. Now, we'll come back to Miriam later on, because she has, I say, in one of the other rooms upstairs. If you look at, if you come back round here later and have a look around, we've got these old prints on the wall. These actually show the hall essentially as it was before the Victorians started to fiddle around with it, develop it. Stuff has been moved about in here. But it's a very, very old little room. I'm going to shut up, have a couple of minutes, just wander around, and then I'm just going to be stood outside in the doorway. If you hear a muffled scream, don't be alarmed.
There's one room along, various places. Well, the one room upstairs, I could tell you a story about that, but the one room along here, I took some photos myself, and there were two very large orbs. They were like translucent circles, and you could actually see a pattern, rather like a snowflake. I mean, there was certainly not dust. I mean, I'm a photographer.
No. Because I lost my power when I touched it.
Alright, shall we go to the entrance hall?
I see something different every time.
No.
Right, one of the things here is, so this is Tudor, right, this is the original medieval building, okay, and this is the original door into it, and that was originally the door into the tower, the staircase that took you to the top of the tower, fair enough. But, so this is Tudor, alright, but we've had somebody coming in, and this is not something we're just learning about, is witch marks.
Protection marks.
Protection against witches. And we've had a couple of incidents, not with witches, of stuff that's just turning up. I work in Blackburn Museum, and we've got this old loom, and on the side of it you can see drawn, like with a pair of compasses, like these circular, and you think it just looks like somebody's been doodling with a pair of compasses. Except, of course, somebody said, oh yeah, just have a look at this witch mark. But you think, actually, that could have been photographed off our loom. And this is late, mid-19th century. And then we had some builders came in one day, and these guys were covered in like builder's dust, you know, they'd actually come from the house they were renovating. And they said, we found this and we thought you might be interested. And it turned out to be an old clog, which is, you know, kind of old sort of a shoe. And it was a woman's clog, and it was in desperately tatty, and it had obviously been fixed with bits of string that whoever had this clog was obviously desperately poor. And there was just one of them, and we said, it's a clog, it's an old tatty woman's clog. And they said, yeah, but why did we find it inside a wall that we were knocking down? He said, that's one of the ancient protections against witchcraft, is to put a shoe inside a wall to stop them coming in. And you think, this is 19th century. This is not like the medieval period. No. This is like the year my grandmother was born in this period, and they're still putting shoes inside walls when they're building these houses in Blackburn. I just thought it was really quite chilling at that point. You think, that is like, yeah, something's going on. But what we know is on here, now there might be somebody doodling with a pair of compasses, okay? But actually what you can see is, you can see them. Can you see this here? Yeah? There's one there. There. These are protection marks. You would find them on an entrance. And there's one here which actually has been turned into a date. 1, 7, I don't know what the significance of the number is, if it has one at all. But this date, this door is Tudor. But somebody's gone to the trouble of putting them on, and there are other marks, some of which actually are. We'll find them later on, actually. We'll find another witch mark upstairs.
But there's what they call medieval graffiti, isn't there?
Yeah.
That round circle with a dot in the middle to protect from evil spirits. Thank you,
So it
Peter.
wasn't just focus that was coming in through the door that they were bothered about. So, yeah. So this is, yeah. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to go upstairs. This is our, I think, a really nice pleasant space. And this is Victorian. And this guy here was one of the last owners of the house. He actually wasn't a soldier. He just liked dressing up. And he gave, the soldiers, he was very keen on soldiers. And he would give them permission to actually use his land for practice on. And actually the Lancashire Fusiliers set off for Gallipoli actually from here in 1915. Very famous event. So come on upstairs.
You know, you will know, you're familiar with the story of this couple on the painting?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, is she really young?
Yeah,
he
this
was really old.
So for those who aren't aware, I mean, this, he lived at Turton Tower. He was, for a while, the place was rented out. And 1743, the date there, he was a tenant here. And we believe she was a housekeeper. And of course they must have fallen in love. Look at the happy, joyful faces.
Yeah.
She looks knackered.
And this is their wedding portrait.
Oh God.
Because they got married. He was 86, she was 28. Which might explain the look on her face.
I know.
Yeah. But needless to say, they had the first child within 12 months of getting married. And he lived to be over 100 and, he was 101? 101, I think he was. He lived till that age. He became quite a celebrity at the time. It was something to do, I always get this wrong, but it was something to do with, he was actually the only man around who had been born and was around when in time of Cromwell or something. It always, so yeah, he became a celebrity in the area. People used to come and visit. But yeah.
This is this period. We know that this place was certainly had the doors kicked in, and it had during the Civil War period. It was attacked on 3 occasions. So you've got to imagine this place with the doors being kicked in and like roundheads and cavaliers rampaging through, demanding money with menaces and stuff like that. It's not quite as genteel as it might seem now. And then it goes into a period of decline where it becomes what is essentially a house in multiple occupancy. We don't know who the tenants were. There's people coming and going. Lots of families moved in, and the tower really declines, and it ends up on the verge of falling down before it's bought and restored. So, you know, all sorts of bits and pieces have gone on here. When you see it in its Victorian state now, don't think it's always sort of been like this. The timber of the staircase is Tudor. So come on upstairs, and we'll have a look at some of the other rooms upstairs. Yeah, I don't know.
There's so many of them as well.
Yeah, well, you just feel like
being watched. Wound up, do we?
Another clock.
We don't. They have been wound up.
No, I was still in the bottom corridor, and I thought for a minute I heard
Might have been somebody's phone.
ticking. No, ticking.
Oh, ticking.
Ticking clock. And then no.
No, but actually there is a story that is in Peter's book about the clock, of one of the clocks. There's a caretaker here called Sam Weatherall. In the 50s, Peter, was it? 70s, sorry. And his job was to keep the grandfather clocks wound up and going. And he made a record that there was always one grandfather clock at the end of the corridor. But no matter when he wound it up, whether it was first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening before he went home, middle of the day. When he'd come in the next day, they'd always stopped at 35 minutes past midnight. And that was the clock at the end of the corridor. Now you might notice there's a clock at the end of the corridor, there's a clock at the end of the corridor, there's one downstairs at the end of the corridor.
Oh, God.
We
We
don't
don't know which
know.
one it is, and we don't think any of them are working at the moment. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to go into this suite of rooms. So that's the original tower there, and the original spiral staircase would have gone up through there, but that's been taken out here. We'll see it upstairs. This is one of the Tudor villas. You know the one downstairs, the library? This is the upstairs. So it would have had an upstairs and downstairs, and it would have been built as extra accommodation. Let's go in.
This is the Bradshaw room? No.
This is, well, I don't know what it's called, we call it the Tapestry Bedroom.
Right.
So all the tapestries and all the bed hangings are modern reproduction. Okay. So this is, the bed is associated with the house. It's been involved with the house for a long time. And what happens is, in the late 19th century, the house is like winding down as a house. As families sort of run out of money, they sell the house. And the contents get cleared off. But this bed was sold, and it was bought by the Victoria and Albert Museum, because they swooped in and got some of the bits of furniture. And this was bought, and when it becomes a museum again in the late 1970s, for argument's sake, they allow us to borrow it back. So it does actually belong to the house. It's been here for a long, long time. And you've got the various grotesques around the top here, obviously to frighten off evil spirits. You'll notice it's very short, not because necessarily they were short, but because they actually slept almost sort of sitting up, because they were bothered about lying on the back and the mouth falls open and evil spirits can sort of get in. So they would actually sleep more or less sitting up. Yeah. Now this is a cradle, 1630.
Yeah.
So-
She had to go out.
This is,
Quite sensitive.
yeah, it does. This is a cradle. Now, if you look, the holes across the top here, this has come from the Bradshaw Hall. It's not original to this. This is original to this house. This isn't. A lot of the furniture in here came from the Bradshaw Hall. Very cute little chair, including this. Now, you want Cat's Cradle?
Yeah, I remember it.
Ah,
Wow,
right.
why don't I?
Now,
Thanks.
Cat's Cradle is for these holes, because they believe that if you put a baby to sleep in the cot, cats would creep in, attracted by the baby's warmth, and if they curled up on the baby's face, would smother it. So the cat's cradle is to keep the cat out of the cradle. Okay. Now, one thing it does is, apparently, it will just rock of its own accord. It also rocks if you touch that bit of stone on the end, so don't be alarmed. Okay. All right. But yeah, the cradle itself will rock of its own accord. Now, what we're going to do is, I'm going to just shut up and let you explore this room, because it's got some very attractive old furniture in. A lot of it's Jacobean, 17th century, so really nice furniture. There is a garderobe, so that would have been the original loo in there, so it's not an ensuite. Please don't use it. Please don't use it, because it does not. Right? So I'm going to let you have a look.
You-
Now, what we're going to do
you
then
picked it
is
up.
we're actually going to
Yeah.
go into the little room next door, which is a
Oh no, it's right, I can't breathe.
Really? It's freezing in here. It's cold.
No, it's all right. You okay? You're too hot now.
This is how it affects her. She's a bit quite sensitive.
In that room.
I couldn't do with that.
My favourite room in the whole house.
Wow.
This is my favourite room in the whole house.
This is like the joiner, isn't it? Like,
This
this
is.
didn't used to be here or something, did it? Or...
Well, let's go in. We're going to talk about it.
This is not good.
That's
Yeah.
like the old bit of the house.
Well,
bit,
yeah,
I remember.
you know, the stories in these two spaces.
No,
Peters remind me of the two photography students earlier this year in April.
it's about the size of my
Yeah, we had, right, it's not a big group, so we can all fit in here quite cosily. Right, this is a very strange little space, which I always thought was really, really interesting, but it just gets more sinister and more people talk about it.
It is the connecting wall.
Oh, it's that.
So it's what we call the tapestry dressing room. But I think that's just the name we've
That's the
given
name
to
we give it to, because these, we don't know what
But
somebody
it did have this
originally
connecting door, so it could have been used as
So-
a dressing
Yeah.
room to that bedroom.
Yeah, this was
Yeah.
this is the original crook frame. So this is the original outside of the tower. In medieval times, we'd have been like hanging in midair here,
Oh, God.
right? Because that's the mullion over this window, which has been blocked up. We'll leave you to explore the next rooms on your own account. But this is a little crook frame, and you can see from the shape of it. Now we've had a couple of incidents. Yeah. Well. I occasionally get kids in here and I say like, oh yeah, John, look right, yeah, that's fine. So they say, can we go down there? And I say, well, yeah, but you can't, you know, because they can't go anywhere. But actually, if you look, some floorboarding does just go into the corner there. But yeah, we had, do come in. we
So
had-
the reason I like this room very much is if you've got a long enough arm span, which I don't quite, you can touch medieval and Tudor at the same time. But as Steve said, they were separate, and you can see that when you look down this thing. Peter, could I borrow your torch again, please?
Oh, God, I don't
Now
like a
we
watch,
have a volunteer called Graham, who he actually works for Virgin Media, and he's very busy these days. But at one time he used to do quite a few tours for us, and he was on one weekend. And as Steve's just said about the young kids, he was on I think it was a Saturday, and he had a family with him, 2 young boys, came in here, and he was showing them how the crook frame had been added. It was separate, just joined in later. You can see that waffle and doors kind of effect down there. So these boys said, can we go in there? He said, well, don't get stuck, will you? You know, but just so they crawled off down there and then came back out again, and that was that. Carried on with the tour. The day after, there was another group who he was taking round, and in this group there were 2 ladies. It was a group, something like this, but there were 2 ladies in. He says, and one lady, she looked, she had a leather jacket on, biker boots. She looked like, you know, she just stepped off a motorbike or something. Very slim and slender, only tiny, very slim and slender. And she was with a friend. She said, and we came in here, and he says, I was doing the tour again like that. And she said, can I go down? Can I have a look down there? So he said, like he said to the boys the day before, yeah, as long as you don't, you know, don't get stuck. So she started walking down there, and Graham turned and he's talking to her. And he turned around and she disappeared.
What?
She had disappeared. And he was, where on earth has she gone? And just as he was saying, where on earth has she gone to? She came out. If you look right down there at the bottom, there's like a panel.
Yeah.
At the side.
Yeah.
And just as he said that, she came out from that panel
Right.
at the bottom, came out of here, ashen face, shaking, just saying, that is horrible, that is horrible. There's something in there, it's like a serpent, and it was coming for me. And Graham was like, and he said, well, he said, I know there were 2 little lads down there yesterday, but he says, but I don't think there's anything down there. And her friend, who was quiet, just turned to Graham and said, if she says she's seen something down there, there is something down there.
And I think that these floorboards will just go down to that practice. And actually at the end, because that outside wall, the corridor wall, is not part of this building. It just faces it. there's a gap, and actually it will go all the way down to the ground floor. So actually it's really quite, you really need to be really careful, because I think there's a vertical drop down to whatever there is on the ground floor. So we do need to be careful, and she's obviously there's something down there. And we had Peter was saying, was it early this, was it this year with the two students, the two girls?
Well, scary, more scary. Have you just seen something in there?
Well, yeah, I think they go for that.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to
It's not
go back in here, because there's a story I'd forgotten that Peter.
Oh, sorry.
And you know Graham Marks? Do you?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite just a photo this morning.
Yeah.
April 27th this year, I'm on the gardening team, so I was working outside on the garden. It was a beautiful day. I see there's a commotion taking place, and these two young ladies, like yourselves, walk past me. Hello. And one was wearing a full-length dress from her neck down, of Victorian style. And her hair was done up in a bun, and her other friend was, normal clothing, but she was carrying this camera. So one of the team members came and said, "Those two ladies have just seen a ghost inside the tower." I said, "What?" So of course I chased after them, and the story that they gave to me was that they were in this very room. And
Sorry, I'm just interjecting there, Peter, because I was on duty that day. They were, it was a fashion photography student and her friend
Right.
who wanted a location shot
Right, okay.
of where. So she came into this bedroom where you are now,
Oh, God.
and I'll let you carry on. So I'm just sorry, I put it into
I was going to tell them.
Sorry, I interjected.
No problem. So, trying to get it in sequence now. So she had this smartphone with the camera on board, you see. So it wasn't a professional camera, as I was thinking for a moment. So she showed me what she had taken, and apparently they got permission, but the lady with the Victorian dress, they're your age group, students, and she was sat on the corner of the bed, you see, while this other lady was taking the photograph. And she said, "I can't focus, the camera won't focus." Well, as you know, the self-focusing things, and it wouldn't come into focus. And then she noticed that this grey mist was forming around the young lady sitting on the bed there. And the young lady, although she didn't see the mist, and she got this dreaded feeling. And as she looked towards this wall here, she noticed this black shape started to glide across and form around this bedpost. So the two of them made a pact, they legged it, and one of the guides who was outside saw them running out, and the guide said they looked terrified.
Oh.
And she showed me the photo on her camera, and you could see the mist quite clearly. It's a really nice room.
Have you got
Yeah, it's a little odd. Talking of a little odd, let's go and have a look in another room. What did you see? Okay.
I know the heating's not on, but there's definite temperature fluctuations in there.
Feel my hands.
She's boiling. She
boiling.
goes hot, I go cold.
Yeah, feel my hands. You're roasted.
She, I'm freezing with gloves on.
This is Mabel. It's
Okay, now we're going to go into this room, which is known as the chapel. There is no evidence that it was ever a chapel. Okay, but it's just known as a chapel. And you can see that it's almost simple as a bedroom, but in here there is a really creepalicious When you're in there, I'll tell you the other stories. Do go in.
Okay, yeah.
Your mum takes
You've got to have a bit of levity. The old Masonic, whatever it is, very nice. German, 15th century. What is it?
That one?
No, I don't like it.
Really?
I don't know.
We haven't been in it.
Yeah, can't even.
So he's painted in black and white, and yet, in shades of grey, and yet the figures in the background are all in colour. There is in fact one splash of colour. That's not the right word, but there is a touch of colour on his portrait. Have a look. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you see where it is? It took me ages to work this out.
Is it actual colour or just...
It is colour, yeah. But you can see that he's got...
yeah, something on his neck.
yeah, look closely. Can
Yeah,
you see?
oh,
Oh no.
wow, yes. Yeah,
Was he behind?
Why has he got his...
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
It's a portrait, it's a post-mortem
Wow.
portrait of Charles I after
Right.
his execution.
Wow.
Because when he was buried, they, before he was buried, they sewed his head back on. And you can see that's
Oh,
why
wow.
his skin is grey, of course, because there's no blood.
And his eyes.
And his eyes are closed. And there he is on
And
the
there's-
scaffold in the
there's
background. And there's the little red line around his neck. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a post-mortem portrait of Charles I.
Nice.
Execution.
I remember,
Which is why his eyes are closed.
but they look puffy as well and
Yeah.
weird. Oh.
How have you got it here?
No idea. Absolutely no idea.
Weird, that.
None
Right.
whatsoever. No.
What's the
No.
connection?
Don't know. And you can see this room is it's actually, you know, you kind of think it would be, you know, quite a nice room. It's Tudor, it's a bedroom, and it's got a fireplace, which is great. And you can see that, oddly, bits of it have shifted over the years. Because if you look at this, if you look at the wall here, you can see that the wall actually leans almost outwards.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
Now,
yeah, it does, it is, yeah.
are you sure you're comfortable stood there?
No, what amazing.
Yeah. Right. Because the door here, when you open up in the morning, you unlock and you simply push the door to. And unlike that door, which has got a rock to keep it closed, this one doesn't have to have one because the way in which the door is, because the wall is sloping outwards, the door just sits there. Because this wall actually leans slightly like that. So the door just like leans against the wall, okay? Now, were you in the building on this day? You were,
I
weren't
was
you?
down at the reception desk this day,
Yeah.
yes. And
Who was up here?
it was two of our room stewards, Scylla and Faith.
One of them was sat on the stair there, wasn't it?
It was a quiet Friday afternoon.
Yeah, there was nobody in.
There wasn't any visitors in. I was on reception desk, and if you've been in the house, you'll know we like to have a floor steward on each floor. So I think Scylla was on the top floor, Faith does this floor, and we had another one downstairs. Because it was quiet, there's nobody in, Scylla had come down from the top floor and was actually just sat on the steps there, talking to Faith, who was on the chair there, you know, and they were talking to each other across the banister about, you know, what they were doing that weekend, or what they were having for tea, or whatever volunteers talk about. When
All of a sudden,
the door closed.
and there was nobody in the building other than Ali downstairs and those two there.
It's against all
It's against laws of physics, but
Yeah.
not the spiritual physics.
And
Oh.
they were shook up about it.
Yeah,
They
they
came
would be.
down to tell me they were shook up about it.
Yeah.
The parents.
And the last story here was told us by John Gardiner, who was like custodian of the building, essentially caretaker, sort of, but he did other bits as well. It wasn't just. And he was on the landing here. It's where instead of Fed, he was the room steward, and a family group came up, and the family consisted of. I don't know where Mum was, but it was Dad with a young child, like a really young child, like kind of like a bit older than a toddler, 4-year-old, something like that. Dad came in with a 4-year-old and his parents. Okay, and so they came up the stairs, and they were just a family group going around the building. And when they came into this room, the little boy adamantly refused to come into the room. I mean, and just threw a hissy fit. You know, he just like tantrums, refused to go into the room, whatever. And he was virtually in fits of tears. So what happened was, Dad stayed with him outside, and his parents came in and had a look around the room. And I think probably because they were a little embarrassed by the scene that the kid was creating, or there was no need to be. They didn't linger long, and then came out, leaving Dad with the little kid on the thing down here. And Dad said to the little kid, he reasoned with him, he said, look, there's nothing in here, you know, like, you've got to conquer your fears. There's nothing to be, you know, you've got to come to terms with things like this or whatever, you know, like calm down, we can just go in. And eventually he talked the kid down, and the kid eventually agreed to go into the room. He said, yes, I'll go in. And Dad said, great. And then the kid said, pointed into the corner over there and said, when he leaves the room. He said, well, there's a man in the corner when he leaves the room.
Did he describe this man at all?
Dressed in dark clothing.
And bad teeth. Yeah. Bad teeth. Dark clothing.
He just stood over
Anything
there.
else to add, Peter?
A menacing appearance.
For the child. So, whatever it was, I'm not in there with it. But you are. Please don't tell me there's something over my head.
I've just seen a very bright orb behind you go from left to right, and I hope it's on here.
Oh, right.
I think
Okay.
I just saw something just,
Yeah.
I didn't say anything about it, it might have just been the light.
One of the
I'm not in there with it. But you are. Please don't tell me there's something over my head.
I've just seen a very bright orb behind you go from left to right, and I hope it's on here.
Oh, right.
I think
Okay.
I just saw something just,
Yeah.
I didn't say anything about it, it might have just been the light.
one of the other stories about in this room was a couple more stories that Graham had been telling me as well, and there was one lady.
Got a nice cold here.
There was one lady who wouldn't step over the threshold. She just wouldn't come over the threshold. She said no. She said you've disturbed something in there, and it's not happy. I'm not going in. There's something that's been disturbed, and I don't want to go in that room. And
Got
they
activity.
wouldn't let him go in. On the same tour, I think,
Just
there was
the
a
night
different
for it.
lady at the end of the tour. She said to Graham, you've got 6 or 7 in this room. But they like you because you talk about them
Yeah.
and you're not a threat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're all right, Steve. We talk about them.
We do. We appreciate that. So yeah.
That's apparently what.
Now,
I think it's
I think given that Peter's gone chillingly cold, it is however late October, and I think perhaps
No, the temperature just simply dropped from that.
yeah,
Frozen,
it was
Come
changing.
warm again now.
a cup of coffee and a nice homemade cake.
In a room where the heaters are on.
Can we tempt you with homemade cake?
No.
Come on.
Steve, I did like eating cake at my house. I do, yeah. Eat cake, yeah. You're good, I've got to get it that.
We can when we come back out before we go upstairs. It'd be a nice one to read up to. Sorry, don't know you.
It was like somebody got a laser pen,
Yeah,
came
honestly,
from here
I
and
saw
went
it.
across.
Yeah, I thought.
20 minutes onto the second part of this film, I'll have a look at it after, see if I can find it. I hope I've got it.
I know, God, yeah.
I'm expecting this battery to drain because
Yeah.
sometimes they drain rapidly.
Quite quick.
I love this place.
Yeah, shit. Do you know it?
2013. The building was empty, so for two of the staff, and they were down by the reception where you came in, and they were talking quietly, and they heard this enormous crash. So they came through not knowing what to expect. And when they got here, this painting had fallen from the wall, hit the floor there, and rolled down to that lower level. The frame was broken, and the painting itself was rumpled, but fortunately not torn. And it went away for quite a long time to be restored, etc. And the thing was, it was fitted to the wall with these brass brackets and screws. And it was just as though the thing had been ripped off the wall. It had been standing on that wall for years, decades. So why would it suddenly drop the way it did? I needed to think about that.
And I should just remind you myself. We're going to go upstairs to the Bradshaw room, which you remember I said downstairs, said like the Victorians added some extra rooms upstairs. We're going to go to those. But as I said, I was never thought anything of it. And then Fiona, the manager, who I always regarded as being very level-headed, she said like, well, actually, I said, come on, Fiona, you're joking. She said, no. And I said, right, okay. Well, tell me the tale. I'll tell you two of them downstairs later on. But when you unlock in the morning, what you do is, you come through this, you push this door open, and then of course what you do is, you turn and you kind of flick these switches on, and then you turn around to actually go and unlock something else. And she said that as she was like turning, and it's like, as always, out the corner of your eye, saw a figure come out from the door, the locked chapel door where Peter stood.
Oh, God.
A figure came down here, and of course, as she obviously in a split second, as her head turned, of course the figure was lost behind this corner here, this corner here, and of course sort of like there was no figure when she came in. But she said, yeah, a figure. She said it might have been dust, it might have been beam of light, but actually the curtains would have, the blinds were drawn. But yeah, she said a figure came out through the closed door, and then just disappeared as she came down there. So yeah, that's the first of Fiona's stories, and we get two more later on, one of which is a real cracker. Come on.
I don't understand that. Oh, God.
Now, what things in here? Right. Good. Let's get to the nitty-gritty, shall we?
Yes.
The gritty-nitty. Couple of things. So the timber bottom skulls were found. The farmer at Timber Bottom Farm was digging on his land, and he found two skull fragments, very old, very brown in the peaty soil, and he cleaned them up. He washed them in the stream, a nearby stream. He looked around and could find no other traces of the skeleton. They're not whole skulls, they're fragments of skulls. One of them is substantially, essentially the top half of the skull, and the other one is just that bit of the skull. So it just takes in the top of the two eye sockets, so it's basically the front of the skull there. So he found these two fragments, took them home, and what started to happen was things started to move about in his house. He'd got a poltergeist.
Bloody hell, you scared me then.
And things started to move about, and they became quite violent. And this became quite well known, and the guy, his landlord, Mr. Bradshaw of Bradshaw Hall, whoever the tenant of Bradshaw Hall was, became very interested, and he approached the tenant farmer approached him and said, like, what should I do? And the guy said, well, bury them in the churchyard. You know Bradshaw Churchyard with the Chapel of Ease, the little tower? Because you've got to imagine that this is a very isolated area, and they built what's called the Chapel of Ease, which was a little chapel. It didn't have a vicar, it didn't have a priest. It was just a chapel where you could go and pray, a Chapel of Ease. And all that's left of it now in the grounds of St. Maxentius is the original chapel tower. The tower is left, and that's all. It's a very small little chapel. So anyway, it's burying them in the grounds of St. Max at the church, which he did. And then the trouble was the activity got more violent in the house. So really frightened now, they went and dug them up, and the guy, the Bradshaw, said, I'll have them. And he took them into Bradshaw Hall, and the poltergeist moved into Bradshaw Hall. And he then did something really macabre. He had the smaller fragment mounted in silver as if to make it like a goblet to drink wine out of. But you've got to remember, this is the early 19th century. Gothic horror, Gothic fiction is really fashionable. So he would never have used it to drink on, but that's what he did. Okay? So he then had those two fragments, and the ghost moved in. And then what he did was he brought out, the whole problem's only solved when he had the Bradshaw family Bible. He had the Bradshaw family Bible brought out, the two skull fragments were placed on the Bible, and the activity stopped. And that was fine for the next 50 years. And then in the 1920s, it was noticed that the silver mounts on the smaller fragment were like deteriorated, so they needed a bit of like mending. So it was taken off the Bible and taken into Manchester Museum to have one of the conservators actually have a look at it and do a bit of fixing. Well, it wasn't just a skull fragment that moved into the museum. Things started, yeah? And it was only solved by taking the Bible with the other skull fragment all the way into Manchester, and when it wasn't being worked on, it was kept stored on the Bible. And that solved the problem. So those are the two timber-bottom skulls. Are you ready?
Oh, look at that. Oh, God.
Those are the skulls. Yeah.
We've heard about these for so
Yeah.
long, haven't we?
Right, you've never seen them?
No.
Oh, wow. So those are the timber-bottom skulls. And you can see the larger fragment is virtually a whole skull. And the
Yeah.
smaller fragment is mounted on silver. We do have a close
Yeah,
look.
come have a look.
Look at that.
Are you gonna-
Now, you're talking about orbs, okay?
Yeah.
So we had one group in here,
Wow.
and they were beyond that one.
It's like
We
a
had
tuck-in.
somebody over here, stood where this gentleman stood now, and they had the camera pointing over here. So they said, would you like to have a look? And I said, go on then. You know. And so I actually thought, my first thoughts were, because I'm a background in science, I thought, this has to be a downloadable app, right? So, and you could see these here, you look there, here. There were these like little white balls, orbs, like just drifting downwards. And then apparently it's a problem with digital photography. Because I looked it up online, immediately went home and up to like, come on, this has to be an app. I don't believe this. And apparently it's an common artifact of digital photography. They don't know what caused it. Almost certainly dust, but they just don't know. But then, what you noticed on this film footage that this woman had taken in this room just here were the ones going sideways and really zigzagging about. I thought that is very, very strange. Yeah, that's very odd. So those are the timber bottom skulls. Now, this room is actually not particularly bothered. By all means, have a look at it, give it a read. Yeah. Yeah, manifested itself over the 150 years.
So if you actually took that off now, would like things...
Yeah, well in theory,
Not
yes,
saying I
but
wanna
I
do
know
that.
exactly. I don't know what the curators did actually when they put it into the case, how they did it. Whether they kept them on the skull as they lifted it into the case, on the bone as they lifted into the case, I've no idea.
I like that it's sealed as well.
Yeah,
Like,
you just
no
want it
one-
left well alone, don't you?
Yeah.
Now, this is not the most troubled room. Far and away, the most troubled room is the next room, the bedroom. Shall we go and have a look?
Yeah.
Did we find Ali, by the way?
Well,
Oh, she'll be just doing the washing up, won't she?
of course you will.
Come on.
Oh, we should be. Oh,
Yeah, she's,
Ah,
have a look in there. That's big. Bed pans. It's the dressing room.
Out there. No.
Now, okay. This is the Bradshaw bedroom, and funny. Do you know what I find funny is when I'm unlocking first thing in the morning, I just open the door a crack, flick on the light switch, and then I go and open the other two rooms, and I come back in here when the light's switched on, when the lights come on, and then I unplug the curtains and things, and I discovered that that's how everybody comes into this room.
Because it's too.
Everybody just does it like that. Nobody just likes to just come straight into this room, which is strange, isn't it? Now, it's modern, it's Victorian. I mean, look at the cut of the stonework, it's Victorian, okay? This came from Bradshaw Hall. This isn't the original fireplace, it was added in the 1950s. The stonework came from Bradshaw Hall to make it look a bit more authentic and old, okay? And the furniture, I think, came from Bradshaw as well. Right? And, sorry, okay, right. So, few stories from here. John Gardiner, I've got to get, there's a lot of stories in here, I've got to just remember them all. So John Gardiner was the custodian, went to the garden, the family. He came in one day, and he just walked straight in, and he saw something, flick the lights on, something hanging in the air here. I'm not sure what it was, but so it's described as kind of sparkly, just hanging in the air here. So that's something of nothing. Well, what he did was, as what John does is, of course, John doesn't work here anymore, he's retired, but what he would do is, of course, like as I will do tonight on my own, I will wander throughout the building, locking it up, okay? So, John locks up the room, you pull the curtains down, pull the blinds down, pull the curtains too, and then you switch off the lights, go out the door and lock the door. And that's what he did. Came in the next morning, opened the door, switched the light on. When he came in, the bed covers were thrown back. That chair there, Peter, where was the chair? Was it over? It was over that corner, wasn't it? It's there. And it had been pushed back.
The chair was there, and the floor was covered with a carpet.
Right.
And the chair was up against the fireplace, And the carpet was pushed back underneath the chairs, or somebody had pushed back while sitting in the chair.
Yeah, and the covers were all thrown back. Now, he'd locked it up the night before. And then the last one with John occurred when he was giving a tour. Just stay there. Don't move. He was giving a tour, and as he came in, the people came into the room as we've done here, and were stood in this area here, when he was stood on this side just giving a talk about the room and this, that and the other. When somebody stood roughly where you're stood there, it was a woman, suddenly reeled back, didn't she? She just like was as if she'd been like thrown backwards against the fireplace. And she actually accused John bizarrely of pushing her.
Scattered the goodies that were there.
Because he was actually stood on the other side of the bed. So,
Accused John.
yeah, which is bizarre. But those things have happened in here. Interestingly, I was talking to somebody who came in recently, and there are some, it's on the bed somewhere here. There are some, there.
Oh, have you got it?
Yeah, there's like what looks like, can you see? Yep, just there, just beneath my finger here.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that's almost certainly done with a candle. Just a little char mark on the wood. There, just a little char mark on the wood, and it's an imperfection. Because if it's a perfect panel of wood, it's where an evil spirit can get in. So you would put that, you would just char it to make it imperfect, and you could touch it then as like a talisman, a good look thing. Okay. Right. So that's this room here. Now, we've got more. Please follow me.
Yeah, you could feel it. No, more friendly.
The trouble is, when I walked in the room, of course, I saw the edge of that corner of my eye. I saw all that dress hanging there.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right. So there was an incident. Ali again was in the building because it's fairly recent. 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
2 seasons ago.
Yeah, 2 seasons ago. Yeah. So we had a couple came in, a man and a woman, and they just drifted around the house, having a look around, and they became separated. The man lingered down in the chapel. The woman wandered off, and obviously house staff are at the bottom of the stairs when they hear this scream.
Piercing scream.
Were you in the building at the time?
Mm.
Yeah. And so everybody, of course, runs towards the scream and comes in through here, and the woman is stood actually in the doorway going into that room. And she could think what had happened. She had no recollection of what had happened. They just found her, like frozen in the doorway. Not literally frozen solid, but just frozen. She could have no recollection of why this had happened to her, what had happened. She was frozen in the doorway. But apparently the staff that have worked here said, if you're going to see something, you walk into the room that way. Which is why everybody opens all the doors, goes into that one, and comes out through this way. And that's how everybody does it. So, I'll invite you to step through the door. Yeah. Because I don't know the story.
When I was just walking through this door here,
Yeah.
and I'll come back round, while you guys were just look, I was looking to that bed, and I don't know if you catch it on that camera, but I've heard a voice in this room, just right behind me.
Yeah.
Did it say anything, Scott? Did it say anything?
I just got back out. I don't know if it's someone talking or was it a mold, but I heard it just come behind me. I said to Dan, like, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Like, you can hear.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys heard it, but that's why I was trying to...
That voices have been heard in here. There's a story as well which we overlooked. There was a lady called Miriam Disley who Steve mentioned downstairs, and he mentioned that she had seen two apparitions. One was the gentleman with the white hair and the green tunic. Well, she had another vision inside this room here, and she came to draw the curtains to, and as she turned around there was a robed figure. Now she wasn't sure whether it was a man or a woman, but it was a robed figure, and she fled. She was very scared.
And just to finish off on it, the very first, we used to call these evenings, we started them, was it 2 seasons ago? I think this is the second season we've been doing them. And we started off calling them a ghost tour. And then there was, we did about maybe 4 or 5 of them, and then there was one couple who'd come on one of the tours, and they got really disappointed. They left us a bad review, actually. This is another story. But because they thought they were coming on a paranormal investigation.
Oh God.
And they said it was more like a tour of a, going round. So we thought, well, we don't want false advertising, we'll change the name. So that's why we've got Mysterious Tales Tour, so that there's no confusion that you're coming on a paranormal ghost hunt kind of thing. But on one of the very first tour we did, there was a couple on there who'd been to Turton Tower a good few times. They do keep coming back. They like visiting here. But they said to us, after we'd been in this room, they said, there's a little girl in here with blonde hair. And she was trying to hold my hand every time while we were stood there listening to you telling the story. She was trying, the guy of the couple was saying, she was trying to hold my hand all the time. She said, but you've got to move the mirror. The mirror isn't right. You've got to move the mirror. Now the mirror, out of due respect, we've moved the mirror. The mirror is the big mirror. Yeah, that is now in the dressing room. It was in the corner of this room here. That was magical. And actually, on an aesthetic thing, I think it is better in the dressing room because it's part of the dressing and should be there. But that was from the first tour.
Now we're going to just kind of moving towards the end now. So we've got to have a look, just go upstairs into the Chatham room via the staircase, of which there's a couple more stories, and then we'll explain what happens next when we get up to the Chatham room. Don't worry, there's no dismemberment involved. We're not some secret club.
Even though it is Halloween.
Again, as he turned to come to sort of just again out the corner of his eye, there's a figure sat on the top step where you are.
Just sat.
Sat on the top step. Yeah.
But what was he dressed like?
Well, he said he was dressed in an English Civil War style costume. Now we know the building was attacked. Yeah.
I'm just mentioning that because that was an interesting conversation we were having over our coffee and cake downstairs about the Civil War period and Turton Tower at that time.
Because it's actually owned by a parliamentarian, but the tenants were royalists.
Owned by a Chatham, but the Orals lived here. Yeah.
And they had a garrison apparently in the farm.
Well, we were talking about what the conversation around the dinner table must have been like if you're an Oral and there's a lot of roundheads sat outside.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to feel very comfortable.
It's not an easy time at all.
No, I think a lot of...
How long did that go on for?
The Civil War goes on.
42, yeah.
Well, 42 to 48. But
Right.
there's various other outbreaks yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ali, you take over now because we've got the ones from the top of the stairs.
We
They're
have,
very clean.
there's a couple of stories about a lady that can be described as a crinoline dress around this top area here. Two stories. One was from James Kay, who was the owner of Turton Tower in Victorian times. He bought it in 1835 up until and the room we're about to go in at that time was there's a billiards room in the far corner and a bedroom in the near corner, and he had a lady guest stay over, and she felt something. She heard a noise as if from this landing here as she was going into her bedroom one night, as if it was like a swish of the dress, and she felt something touch the fabric of her dress. And then the other story that about this top landing as well was I think it was back in the 70s. I think this was in your book, Peter. And one of the ladies here, Doris, was cleaning. She was a cleaning lady, and she was up here doing this landing, and she heard the swishing of what she described as a crinoline dress. She said, and she felt like there was a presence here. There's like a lady who's more or less patrolling, for want of a better word, around this to see who's going in and out of that Chatham room. It's like she's keeping her eye on what's going on up here, and that was the sensation that Doris got when she was cleaning here.
Were the Orals living here when the massacre of Bolton occurred? Do we know the dates?
No, I would have thought the Orals had moved out by then. It's Chatham still owns the place, doesn't he?
Yeah, but Humphrey Chatham never lived here.
No.
But I think his
But I don't know
brother
who his
did,
tenants were at that
or his nephew.
Right.
So the Chathams, I'm not sure when they might tell us on the boards
Yeah, we've got
up
it.
there.
There's a family tree in the other room. Yeah.
So as you're just going over here, for those who've been in the house before, you will have noticed you step over what was the original staircase when it was the medieval tower. And if you just head in, we'll go in that room there. No, Darren.
Okay, I'll leave it.
Yeah, I can't. Let's see, when did they...
I need to refresh my memory on the dates.
Oh, my dates are terrible. I always say, you might notice, I'll say, around about 1640.
Yeah. This is like the steps going up to the belfry.
So yeah, it was in the Chatham family. It was still in the Chatham family around the Civil War. So it would have been George Chatham,
Yes,
Sheriff of Lancashire.
But who his tenants were?
Doesn't mean he lived here.
No, it could have been the
Don't
Orals.
know.
Oh, of course, yeah, he could have sold the tower but remained as a tenant, couldn't he?
Yeah.
And gone from
yeah.
owner to tenant.
Yeah. But it was certainly in the Chatham family still, Turton Tower, during the Civil War.
So this lovely little
But
room.
one of them, Chathams, died here. I can't remember which one it was.
I mean, everybody died from those days.
Well, yeah, but it's actually recorded that he died here.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Looking very austere in the dark coat.
I am glad I put this coat on.
This is the top row of the tower, and it seems a bit odd, but these are actually windows. Because they wanted to make the tower higher, but they wanted to save money. So they built the walls up a bit and dropped the floor a bit to make this big room. So the room below, the ceiling was lowered, which is why you've got, these are the tops of the original windows. And if you look over here, there's a top of a blocked up doorway that would have led off the spiral staircase, you can still see the thing for hanging the door. And there's another little blocked up window on that corner there. So it's been altered a bit. But Ali, you know more about stories in here than I do.
Only that, like what I told you. So originally, during James Kay's time, there was a corridor that came here. That bit, this bit here was a bedroom. Hence what was the garden or toilet in the far corner. And that bit over there was a billiards room. One of the I suppose, stories that have been told. We talk about that lady who just keeping her eye out, watching something, just keeping her eye out, seeing what's going on. Maybe. But one of the things that puzzles people about this place is this here. Which goes back. Now, some suggestions, the only suggestion that I heard that it could be was, what do you call them, like a gun hall, a hideout for the guns, which might link in with civil war or something like that. When they're hiding all the weaponry in there. The only problem with that is, if that was a hideout, if you needed to grab at them things quickly because you were under attack or whatever, most people are right-handed, you would have to turn your back, which doesn't make sense. You wouldn't turn your back on something that's coming in for you to do that. So I don't, that doesn't kind of ring true to me.
No.
So, but I have no explanation as to what that is or why that's there.
It's your classic left-hand staircase, which for sword fighting is ideal, because you've got the right hand and they've got to go around the corner.
Exactly.
We're just following the instinct. And
What would that be? What is it?
ooh, look at this.
Yeah, what do they call it? An amber? I think they call it an amber. I think so. I'm not picking up any stories, listen, but if there's anything there, it'll come up like a...
Yeah.
What is it? Child?
Oh, probably. No, you're all right.
Oh,
Go on. What have you seen?
no, I haven't seen. It's, oh, come down, come.
Eh? What did you see?
No, I didn't see anything. It just, you know, when they were talking about the rustling of,
You pick it up.
yeah. Yeah. That was weird. It was like,
Yeah.
there's one usually through
Yes. Oh yeah.
could be out or something. I love it because there's so many,
Yeah.
you know, sort of little nooks and crannies and cracks and creaks. What's that?
Mm. Very nice.
These wafts of heat.
Yes, and I keep getting wafts of cold.
Yeah, strange, isn't it? Why am I getting lots of heat? Oh dear. Might be.
And so I was actually, I picked up the phone, we've got these ridiculous Microsoft phones now. The phone here, I picked up the phone, I answered the phone, I said like, and I was like saying the conversation out loud so that she could hear it. She was stood over where you are, sir. And basically somebody wanted to do a paranormal tour, and Fiona's good.
Oh God.
And so I said, I'm really sorry, no, it's just not something like that. I said, kind of what's up, Fiona, like, you know. I said, come on, no, because she's incredibly level-headed, and she just said, oh yeah, we'll tell us a tale. And so the till's always been here, and so she said, the first thing in the morning, this is the first story she said, she was like setting up first thing in the morning, she's the only person in the building, and she's working at the till, just getting it whatever, doing whatever, and she hears footsteps and like a long dress down to the floor, sweeping down the corridor here. And so she just ignores it because we have the costumed reenactors in all the time in their Tudor costume. And so she's working at the till, and then kind of a split second later she realises I'm the first one in the building. And when she looked down the corridor, there was no one there. Okay, that's Fiona's first one. Just this is that moment you think, hang on a minute, it's not Claire. I'm the only person in the building. So, and the second one was
Step over here.
I need you to be Marion. So would you like to stand there and be Marion? So if you'd excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So the second one, Fiona was saying that it was a sunny afternoon. It was a sunny afternoon. There was like sunlight streaming in through the windows. It wasn't dark. It wasn't raining. It wasn't anything. It was a lovely sunny afternoon. And so Fiona stood where I stood, and she was talking to Marion, and they were just like whatever, just like nattering as you do. And then Fiona's like chatting away and chatting away. She suddenly realises that Marion has gone completely silent. And what was bothering Fiona was she suddenly realised Marion wasn't looking at her anymore. Marion's gaze was fixed over Fiona's right shoulder. And very, very slowly Fiona turned round and realised in that split second before she turned around and at the corner of her eye she realised, as she said to me, she said, it could just have been a trick of the light. It could just have been dust hanging in the air. But actually there was a figure stood next to her.
Could you not sense?
No, she just said like, she suddenly realised in that moment, she's like, Marion was just stood where you are. Absolutely, she suddenly realised Marion was just looking horrified.
Oh God.
And so she slowly turned as they do in all the movies, and at the corner I realised that there was a figure stood next to her. So those are Fiona. When I do that with a group of kids, I do that. I very surreptitiously go, right, and because they all like it.
Works every time.
So yeah, those are two. Now, that's interesting, because we had a paranormal event one day, one evening, and I was here, and one woman said, she told me this story, and then you told me some stories, and then one of the people on a ghost tour, a mystery tour, told us a story about the bus stop. If you notice outside, the bus stop is actually at the brow of the hill. So you've got some stories, and I was just chatting to this woman. She said, oh yeah, my son was walking from Chapeltown down into Bromley Cross with his girlfriend late one night, as you do with your eyes glued on your mobile phone, when as he came to the crest of the hill, just before the crest of the hill, the phone screen just went black. Oh. God. Just nothing. And of course, like, muttered imprecations. And then he carried on walking, and then just on the other side of the crest of the hill, bing, oh, it came back on. Right? So I thought, oh, that's interesting, you know. And then we've got two stories, one from the 1950s and one from 54 and one from 70, early 70s, about, do quickly tell them, and then I'll finish off with the third one.
54, Frank Edwards, age 34, ex-military, been in the forces for 9 years, tough guy. Driving a bus, single-deck bus, up from Bromley Cross, and he got to the brow of the hill that Steve just mentioned, and he was pulling in towards the bus stop, and it was raining hard. It's a November evening, about this time of year. And the wipers were going, but he could see in the headlights there was this figure standing at the bus stop. So of course he manoeuvred the bus, as they do very professionally, and parked immediately next to the gentleman, as he saw. And as the doors opened, from his seated position, not too far, was this elderly gentleman wearing a white cap. He had a grey-coloured raincoat, walking stick, and brown polished shoes. And although it was raining hard, and he said his face looked rather friendly, he was wizened but friendly. He wasn't sort of threatening. And although it was raining very hard, he said this gentleman was perfectly dry. And then, before he could make his mind up, he just disappeared. Of course he was totally flummoxed. That's when he got back home, he told his wife, and she scoffed. But other people have seen things since.
And then in the 70s there was a similar one, wasn't it? Where was it? A couple was stood at the bus stop. And then again a bus driver pulled in and they're not there.
And on this occasion there was a gentleman passenger
Mm.
and an elderly lady
Mm.
plus the driver,
Mm.
different driver.
Oh, that's right, because the guy got off, didn't he? And they'd all independently seen somebody at the bus stop. But he'd sort of glanced and he'd seen somebody, the guy was pulling in because there's somebody there. And as he stood up to get off, the elderly lady, he turned to say, would you like some help to get off the bus or whatever? She said, no, thank you very much. And in that moment he turned back and went to get off the bus and realised as he sort of stepped off the bus that, oh, I thought there was a couple stood here. And went off and into whatever, he spent an evening with a friend, visiting a friend, I think.
Right.
And as he came back up the hill, and he actually caught the last bus, didn't he?
That's right.
And it was the same bus driver as had dropped him off. So he pulled in and picked him up, and the bus driver, he kind of said, you know, when you dropped me off earlier this evening, and the bus driver said, did you see it as well? He said, see what? The couple? Yeah. And they both seen this couple were not there. And I told this to a group. It wasn't the last group, was it? Last but one, I think.
It was the last but
It was,
one
yeah.
tour that we had, yeah.
And there was a guy there who I actually knew because
Yeah.
he was at the Bolton fencing club, so I knew him from there. And he was just chatting away. And he said, he was really lucky to have been picked up. I said, like, what do you mean? He said, well, Selneck, they had hideous orange and white buses. They took over from Bolton Corporation bus service, and they had these horrible orange and white buses. So don't get me going about Selneck buses, they were hideous. Anywho, he said, oh yeah, Selneck. He said, yeah, bus drivers would often not stop. If they were doing the last bus at night, they would not stop at that bus stop to pick up people.
It was known.
It was, yeah. And that was just one of the people who came. So, oh really? You know, there you go. So there you go, Lancashire's only possessed bus stop. So as you pull out at the bottom there, just glance to your left and see if there's anything there. Of course, it might just be somebody waiting to catch the bus.
Well,
And wipe my window down.
Go away!
So those are our stories, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. It's been lovely to meet you all. And
It's been really
fantastic.
Yeah, really.
very pleasant evening. I hope you've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been really great.
Good.
Well, as we always say, if you do enjoy it, please give us a